All right. Just a second, please.
Thank you.
You are live now.
All right, it is 2:46, Monday, November 1st, and would like to call the Public Utilities and Green Committee meeting to order. If we could please have a roll call, Ms. Viviano.
Freeman,
Aye.
McKittrick,
Aye.
Connor,
Aye.
Mosley, Holland.
Aye.
All members are present except for Mosley.
Thank you. And if I could have a motion from one of the members to accept the minutes from our last meeting, please.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you so much. All right, we have today, who is going to be speaking for us today regarding the ARPA funds when it comes to public utilities? Will that be?
This is Chris Luddle, and we have Sharon from Guidehouse will be speaking today, sir.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Mr. Luddle. Sharon, if you would, please. The presentation is yours.
Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to let Chris go ahead and lead us out.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of committee. Today, we are going to talk about the American Rescue Plan Act and the investment that we are going to make in the infrastructure, particularly into the water distribution system, not only in the distribution system, but also the entire water utility. I want to thank Guidehouse. When we first started talking about this, obviously we were throwing everything at the wall, and obviously everything is not eligible. So we need their expertise in telling us, how to stay in those parameters and how we can best leverage these dollars for our entire system, but our residents, because obviously we all know with the consent decree we have with the sewer, we haven't been able to put a lot of money in water, especially in the last 8 years. So there's been no water rate increases. We're always trying to leverage dollars, and we could talk about that later, how we've leveraged some of these dollars to put money back into water and to replace some of this aging infrastructure. So with that, I'll turn it over to Sharon.
Thanks for that, Chris. So essentially having this understanding and moving forward and figuring out what is eligible, we really dived into understand the investment in infrastructure. In order to put the funds to use as soon as possible, soon after Treasury released the preliminary guidance, the city began developing plans to address existing infrastructures to enhance the well-being of Akron residents, addressing longstanding inequities and exposure to unsafe water. The city of Akron improving the current water system will assist in mitigating the spread of COVID-19 while also enhancing the quality of life for its residents. So truly diving into what can really be done and how we can do it. So what Guidehouse did alongside with Cabin for the city of Akron was we looked at some of these SLURF guidelines while also looking at the EPA guidelines alongside with the clean water state funding guidelines as well. And we come up with 4 things essentially on how we can improve and respond to improving water and sewer infrastructure. The first one is to invest in clean water and treatment of wastewater. Second one is invest in water infrastructure to improve water quality. Third one is improve water infrastructure, including treatment and distribution systems. And number 4, invest in building or upgrading water facilities and transmission distributions and storage systems. These are all pulled from the state and local fiscal recovery funds guidance that we've received alongside other EPA and other clean water guidelines to help determine eligibility. So here we are, the U.S. Treasury requires the city to assign expenditure categories. Here at the bottom left, we have a couple expenditure categories, a couple examples of how we can use these funds to help move the city forward in reference to drinking water treatment, transmission distribution letter remediation, and other water infrastructure, helping us define not only the projects, but also the obligations that we can help them fall under, specifically using some of the program data that we'll be diving into shortly. And I'm going to pass it back over to Chris.
So I wanted to talk about when we talk about lead services and replacing water mains, some of the criteria that we're going to look at, because obviously we don't have unlimited funds, is some of these streets, this is a map of our GIS system, which I have to give our GIS people a lot of credit for. We have developed maps that it's interactive. It's on our website. Public can go to this. They can see if their house has a lead service or not. And they can also go on there and look at their neighborhood. So if you look at Sunset View from Copley to Delia, that's 3,100 feet of 1926 cast iron water main, and it has 41 lead services. So by replacing that main, that 3,100 feet, and we are going to, obviously, if we dig up the road, we're going to replace those 41 lead services in this stretch. And you look at this map and you think, why are those two streets have all that red and the other two streets don't have any? Wasn't this whole neighborhood built at the same time? Well, if you go back and you know, Akron's been very proactive. When we had the CD money, when we rebuilt roads or we replaced water mains, that's what we did. That's why those streets, excuse me, to the right, those three don't show any lead services. So on Morley from Copley to Delia is another 3,100 feet. That's another 1927 cast iron main that has 31 lead services. And then Avalon from Delia to the south dead end is 1,500 feet of 1928 cast iron pipe and has 6 lead services. So this would be something that we would do in our water main replacement, also eliminating those lead services. We also are looking at, when we do this, we are looking at what the restoration is going to be. And obviously, if these streets are going to be up for resurfacing, let's say in the next 5 years, we do not want to resurface a street that has a lot of lead services. So this also plays in the criteria of how we're going to pick these mains. When you have, you know, when you have a lot of water main over 100 years old, we don't have unlimited funds. So we're trying to maximize this program. Next slide. So since 1965, Akron's been aggressively removing lead services and replacing with copper services. We currently have 3,200 active lead services in our system, which over the time, the distribution system, we have reduced 94% of our system is now not lead. One thing I'd like to say, and instead of reading all this, since Mayor Horgan's come into this administration, he took over. The 5 years before he became mayor, we only eliminated about 400 lead services. And he challenged us to go out and get money without raising rates. And since he's been mayor, we have replaced 1,191 lead services. Now, we've done that with resurfacing. We've done that with EPA money. We've leveraged funds. So this money that we're getting, we're going to be able to replace. And our bids are right around 5,000 a lead service. But if we can put these bids out in big chunks, let's say 200 lead services, we hope to get that $5,000 lower. But if we just use the $5,000 number with the 8.5 million, we're going to be able to get rid of about 1,700. And like Sharon said, we have a little bit under 3,000 lead services active in our system. So in our system, we have 82,000 active services. And now that 82,000, we only have little under 3,000 left, or 3,200. We've knocked off the 300 this year, so it's knocked us down under 3,200. So like I said before, we're going to look at the pavement restoration, the resurfacing, and concentrate on those streets in those neighborhoods to maximize the dollars that we're going to be allotted. Next slide.
And then we're going to dive into the water main replacement, if Chris can touch on this.
Yeah, so with the 5 million, we're going to replace about 7 miles of the most critical water main throughout the system. And there again, we're going to prioritize, you know, we might have a water main that's 90 years old and it doesn't have a high break history. Now that goes to the soils, it goes to the infrastructure, but we may have a water main that's 60 years old that is chronically breaking. And those are how we're going to prioritize. And there again, we're going to look at our resurfacing, the condition of the street. And if we're not going to crack a street that it has an aging water main, so we're going to prioritize it that way. Right now the city has quite a few people up at Akron U working on a water main that's 110 years old. Unfortunately, we're having some problems with it. They had to shut some buildings down this morning, so they had to eliminate some classes. So that's just another example of the difficulty we're having with these aging water mains, not only finding parts, but trying to isolate these lines to make repairs. Next slide, Sharon.
And essentially, here's what we look at to determine eligibility for investment in infrastructure. Making sure we're evaluating a lot of the programs, making sure they fall under the eligibility categories, and also not only using the SLURF guidance, also using Clean Water State Revolving Fund, along with the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund. So here's what we have to present in reference to the infrastructure, investment in infrastructure, and specifically trying to push water and sewer replacements and lead remediation. Thank you.
So we can actually stop there, Mr. Chairman, and I'll take any questions and then we can go on. We've been talking about our aging water system and lead services for years, and obviously we're not in the position of other Midwestern cities. I see somewhere up in Michigan, they just passed out 28,000 filters because we have another system up there that's having problems with their lead in their system. So our treatment has been working. Our people are very dedicated, but we do want to remove all these lead services in a timely manner. And I think some of you may have heard, I mean, it came out the other day that the county was awarded $5 million. Well, that $5 million is going to the city of Akron from the state, and that'll help us remove another 1,000 lead services.
Yeah, Chris, obviously the administration is to be commended for what's happened here these past several years, and this is one we wondered if the end was ever in sight, and it gets closer every year. So thank you. I'm going to go just in the order that I see everybody on my screen, and I'll start with Miss Holland, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, gentlemen, for the presentation. I think as much for the benefit of viewers as anyone else, but also for my benefit, I was hoping we could maybe get a more detailed definition of what we're talking about when we're talking about lead service. And specifically, I want to make sure that I'm understanding the term to mean from the service main to the house, or does lead service also include what happens on the other side of the exterior wall in homes that currently have lead supply lines? Can somebody respond to that? And then I have a follow-up question about water mains themselves. Sure,
that's a great question. So in our distribution system, when we talk about lead service or service line, in the street, in any street, the water main, it could be a 6-inch, it could be a 24-inch, it could be a 30-inch cast iron, or what we call ductile iron water main. And off that water main, there's a tap, okay? Typically, it's 3/4 inch or 1 inch. And off that tap, it goes to the curb or the lawn strip. And if there is no sidewalk, it goes to the right-of-way line, which is typically just off the roadway. And there's a valve box there, which we call a service box. That is the portion that we talk about as the lead service line. And very, very few streets, the water line's in the middle of the street. So sewer is in the middle of the street typically. So the water main is, let's say, to the west side or to the east side of the street. So we have short side services, which might only be 6 or 8 feet of piece of lead. And then there's a valve shutoff or a valve that shuts off the water line in the lawn strip. Now from the lawn strip all the way into your house, typically was either copper, and originally it was galvanized. Okay, unless the house was built after the 60s, then it's copper. But even though it was copper, there could have still been that lead out in the street. Okay, so what Akron started doing in the middle 60s was if a homeowner would call and says, I need my box shut off so I can replace the line into my house because the galvanized is corroded to the point where I'm not getting good flow, or it's broken. Akron proactively, if they pulled a permit to do that, Akron would go out and replace that piece of lead in the street. And that's how we reduced these numbers greatly over the years. So all we're talking about is from that water main in the street, whether it's short side or long side, up to the curb. So when we talk about this program, we're going to replace that piece of lead, and then they're going to get a brand new valve in the lawn strip, which we call the curb box, which is, it's not an automatic valve. It takes a key, a wrench, and turn that off. So with our water meter project we're going to be doing next year, we'll be doing an audit and we'll be in every house. But we did this 15 years ago, 16 years ago when they put all new water meters in. So at that time we knew, and very, very infrequent, you ever see lead from the lawn strip into the house. It's just out in the street up to the lawn strip.
Thank you, super helpful. Now, in those instances where we either knew from that audit, that examination, when new water meters went in, or if it's come to anyone's attention since then, to the extent we know about lead lines beyond that point that you just described so well, would this program permit assistance to the homeowner to replace those lead lines?
What the EPA has done recently is they have offered some funding for that, specifically from the lawn strip into the house. When we leveraged $1 million of that, so we do have a program currently that we're doing, but it's not just for lead, it's also for the galvanized. So
Okay.
we've been doing a lot of this with our own staff in the street, but when it comes to private property beyond the sidewalk, we've actually bid that work out and have a contractor doing that. Because as you know, you have retaining walls, you have trees, you have foundations, and we thought it would be better off to have a contractor do that. So last year we did leverage $1 million. And that was one of the programs that I talked about with Mayor Horgan. He in fact went down to Columbus with Jeff Bernowski a few years back to try to lobby to get some of these funds. So that would be something we would look at in this program too, yes.
Okay, great. So at least where it stands today, subject to possibly pursuing this, there's $1 million in seed money for these kinds of situations, subject to further exploration by.
To be clear, it's not ARPA money. That was money we leveraged last year, the $1 million.
Got it.
Yes.
Got it, through the state EPA. Okay,
Yeah.
very helpful. My second question is about the water mains. And as we all know, those of us who are, anxiously reading the headline news every day, there's an infrastructure bill that is sitting in Washington. And I guess my question is, in the event that water main replacement were not part of ARPA spending plans for the city of Akron, where would water main replacement normally land for city planning? And or would that logically fall under whatever Akron would be poised to receive under the not yet passed but anticipated federal infrastructure bill?
Well, I could tell you this, we'll take all we can get.
Right on.
If you figure water main replacement at $1 million a mile and you have 1,200 miles, we can use all the money we can. So we're trying to leverage all that money, whatever comes out from the US, or the state's going to put more money out too. Okay. I mean, we really feel like this 93 million the state just put out, we've got projects that we have submitted. We had to submit them through Summit County, but we've submitted probably for another 30 million through the state to try to leverage to replace more of these water mains.
And if we were in a situation where there had been no pandemic, where ARPA funds did not exist and an infrastructure bill was not presently pending, where would water main replacement costs typically land in a prospective Akron budget?
Well, I mean, with what's going on with our residents and not in the constraints we have with the sewer, every year we budget a little bit of money for critical infrastructure replacement. It's just, we could always use more money. So the conversation is, how do we go after more funding? We haven't talked about, we haven't even talked about doing any type of rate increase. We haven't done a rate increase since 2014. Okay, so we haven't gone down that road. We are trying to maintain what we have with the funds we have available.
Thank you, Mr. Luddle.
You're welcome.
All right, Mr. Malik.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Mr. Luddle, for the presentation. Just a couple of questions. First, also, like my colleagues, want to commend you and everyone in the service department and the mayor for the focus on lead services. I know that a lot of time and effort has been put into that. And I think it's a really worthy goal. I'm glad that we're focusing this money on it as well. When we look at prioritizing which services are, hopefully we're getting to the point, like you said, with the, between the state and federal money, that we're going to be taking care of most of them. But is there any way to prioritize based on adverse health impacts in specific neighborhoods and zip codes that are associated with lead?
Well, when we look at these, we've been treating for lead for years. Okay, zinc orthophosphate is the one. We've had our lowest lead level testing, and we're way under the state's criteria. So we know our system is well in compliance. Okay, we always are monitoring our chemicals. We are always monitoring our system. We take samples every day. So with that being said, we are looking at getting rid of like the example I showed on the water main. If we can get rid of those 1,700 and then we can get rid of the other 1,000, now we're 2,700. That only leaves us a few hundred, which we've been doing, like I said, with since Mayor Horgan's been coming in. I'm really thinking in the next 4 years, they're going to be eradicated. Okay, at least the active ones. Now we do have some that are still inactive, which means it could be a house was tore down, but before a new house would be built, that lead service would be removed and replaced. So we do still have some in our system, what we call inactive, but we would never let a house be built with a lead service. It would be taken care of at that time.
Okay, but I'm wondering, just to go back, is there a way to look at where we're having adverse health disparities that are associated with lead and to kind of backwards engineer the priorities based on that? I understand that the treatment shows that we're within acceptable limits, but I mean, looking at it backwards.
I mean, when we've talked to the health department about these things, they feel like any of those health risks have all come from lead paint. We've asked them, is it the water? We test the water. We haven't got any of that criteria where there's a direct relation between a lead service and a health disparity or a high lead level in a house. It's always been lead paint.
Okay, well, that actually, it's great because that leads into my comment, which is going to be that this is a great approach, but I do want to spotlight the work that's been being done in Cleveland, the Lead Safe CLE Coalition, which is a lot of organizations up there that are working specifically on remediation of lead paint in homes. So I hope that that's something that we can look at as we move through this program as well.
Sure.
The second question was relating to the same things that Councilwoman Holland was mentioning. So going back, I guess, is there some way that because obviously we have much more demand for replacement of water mains than we could ever, we can't go and fix all of them. But we're trying to fix as many as we can, as quickly as we can within the constraints. I get that. But if we do, is there some way of figuring out the total number of costs or kind of a forecast of what we would like to do over the next 5 years or 10 years? Because, this amount of money, right, the 5 million, it's going to make an impact, but it's not, going to fix all of them, right? So is there some kind of broader forecast? And then also, how does that relate to, I know before COVID hit, we were in the middle of a rate review. And what is the rate review saying is expected in terms of the amount of water main miles that we are going to repair to keep us at current rates, or to lower rates, or to raise rates? I think that kind of backup information would be helpful, because I think to your point, we could spend, we could spend all of the ARPA money, or we could spend none of the ARPA money on this. But at the end of the day, these are, decisions that we have to balance what the best investment is.
Well, I could tell you this, when we did the rate review, and we're still fine tuning that, that was before we knew we were getting any of this money. So that could change things, okay? And then secondly, we're working with our GIS people to not only rate each water main, and it goes by not only the age, but it also goes by the break history. So I can get you those numbers, and then we could prioritize. That's how we're prioritizing the money that $5 million. That's how we got this to this number. Now, if we get more money from the state, we get more money from the federal government, we will use that same criteria on those millions of dollars and replace those lines. One thing that we have to, we know there's going to be a challenge is how to get all this work done in this amount of time with the amount of labor. So we have recently looked at some minority business. I try to attract them. We've put a lot of advertising on Bonfire, and I got to give Shelley Goodrich and I got to give Sheena credit, because they've got some companies and we have offered for them, and a few have taken advantage, where they've come out and watched our crews, show them how to do it. And these guys, it's not like they haven't done this before. They have, they have the equipment. The question is, do they actually want to do the work? Okay, we want to help them do the work, but they're so busy too. It's like, do they want? So we're trying to maximize how we can help them. It's not like we're just going to give them one on High Street. We're going to give them 6 on High Street. And we may start, like I said to Councilwoman Howland, we'll give them the short side ones. If they feel more comfortable doing the short side, that's less copper they have to buy. That's a curb box, and we will help them do it. So we're kind of worried about right now is just getting the labor to do all this work. So that's why we're going to do a little bit at a time and get as much done as we can with the available workforce. Because we know we can't do it with our own staff. There's just no way. There's no way in the world we could hire that many people. We don't have the equipment.
Sure, no, that's helpful context. But yeah, some of that information that you mentioned would be helpful to kind of see how you got to that 5 million number.
Sure.
And I guess you brought it up. What is the status of the rate review? When can we expect to see that?
Well, we're doing some things with sewer right now. We're still in the middle of a negotiation with our consent decree. So until that's done, we have another meeting. We meet with them monthly, and we have a rate review with them coming up Thursday. But we still, as you know, if you know our consent decree, we still have another tunnel to do, and we have a treatment facility at the tunnel we just got done with. So we have a few $1 million worth of work left to do, and we're actively working with them to reduce those costs. So until we find out from them, and that's probably not going to be till the spring, we're not going to be able to do a real full rate review based on, because we anticipate negotiating something to achieve the same environmental benefit as we did laid out in the consent decree. So that's probably not going to be till spring till we get those answers from the US EPA.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Little. And just a final comment. I think, again, don't want to put words in my colleagues' mouth. I think implicit in some of the points was that, the ARPA money really was intended to help us bounce back from the disparities that were uncovered by the pandemic. But I think that if there is money that's available, whether it's from the infrastructure bill or from future bills, that will allow us to, perhaps invest more of this money, as much of this ARPA money as possible, into things that will remedy those systemic disparities. I think that's really what we need to be focusing on, while recognizing that we have infrastructure needs. So that's where any information that would help show the entire picture of what the next 5 to 10 years of costs for our water main program would be really helpful to get a sense of that.
Sure.
All right, Ms. Hamobian.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My first question, you may have already answered it, Chris, but you might want to just talk about it a little bit more. Active versus inactive, and it sounds like the house is empty if it's inactive, but talk about that a little bit. And with these dollars, we have until, it sounds like 2026 to spend them. What are you anticipating doing annually in order to reach the goal of removing 3,200 active lead water services lines?
Doing some quick math, Councilwoman. Well, first, your first question, inactive or active. Active means there's actually, it's connected to a house and they're using water. Inactive could be two things. One, the house could be vacant and it's just in between, they're working on it. They haven't moved in yet, or it's totally vacant. That's inactive and no one's living there. And the water may not have been on for a couple of years. Or inactive could be that the house no longer exists, but there is a curb box on the lawn strip, and that's inactive. And then thirdly, we actually had some services put in when neighborhoods were built, and there was never a house on that lot. Okay, that would be inactive. So those are the criteria. One, the house is just in between someone, living and not living there. Two, it hasn't been active for a few years. Three, there's no house at all. It was demoed. And four, it was put in when the infrastructure was put in 60, 70 years ago, and there was never a house built. So that's inactive, and obviously active, someone's living in the house. So now your other question, if I'm trying to, can you kind of repeat what?
Considering we have up to 2026, I guess.
Yeah, I
to
mean,
spend
if we,
this money.
our crews do 1 or 2 a day. And if you figure there's 60 working days a year, if you had one crew, you could, in a year, you could do 250 or 300. So contractors, they get paid by the service. They'll do 2 a day. So a crew could do 500 in a year, a contractor. So we don't anticipate having a problem doing 1,000 of these a year. Okay. Well, we've only got 2,900. So it would only take a couple years if we had all the funding to eradicate them. But there again, we're not tearing up every street at one time. We want to make sure they get the restoration done and then we get the streets paved. So we don't feel like there'd be any problem at all in 4 years if we had all the funding. But this money, the 1,700, we think we could do in 3 years easy.
Okay, any other questions?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Little, if there would be some other questions that would arise throughout the week, where would you have us direct those questions, to your office or?
Sure, they could just email them to me, Chairman.
Okay, very good. Excellent. Thank you so much. Thank you for the presentation.
You're welcome.
We will continue to have these presentations in all of the committees. And if there is nothing else to come before us.
Chair, I'm not sure if you can see that Councilman Malik has his hand raised.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see that, Shamus. Go right ahead.
Sure, just a question. And again, thank you, Mr. Brown and Mr. Little, for the presentation. The sections about the minor plumbing program and Akron Cares, when will those be discussed?
I believe we're going to address those in housing for the minor home repairs for the plumbing, and I believe finance is going to cover the CARES Act.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Very good. All right. Thank you, everybody, for your participation. Good questions, and we will adjourn at 3:20. Thank you.
Our final committee meeting for the day is the Budget and Finance Committee. Those committee members are Freeman, Amobian, Malik, Baylor, and Lombardo. We do have all members present whenever you're ready, Mr. Chair.
Okay, we are still live, Sarah?
We
Okay,
are.
thank you. All right, it's 3:21. I'd like to call the Budget and Finance Committee meeting to order. Could please have a roll call?
Freeman,
Aye.
Amobian,
Aye, sorry.
that's okay. Malik,
I went on
Aye.
mute.
Baylor,
Aye.
Lombardo.
Aye.
All members are present.
Okay, very good. We have a motion to accept the minutes from our previous meeting, please.
So move.
Second.
A motion, a second. All in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
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 Good. All right, we have one old item that we began to discuss last week. I know there were some questions that were submitted here over the week, and I believe, Mr. Malik, you had submitted some questions, and it seemed that your questions were satisfactorily answered as I looked at the email. So I'm looking to see if there are any other comments, any raised hands. Yes, Mr. Malik.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And yes, I appreciate the Finance Department responding to a number of the questions that I had. And for anyone who'd like to see them, they should be in the on-base record for this ordinance as one of the supporting documents. So very much appreciate that. Still would encourage the committee that if we could wait on passing this until we have a chance to go through all of the ARPA funding presentations that we're receiving. This budget ordinance appropriates $6.3 million in ARPA money. And it's been a week since it was introduced, and we're in our second week of 7 presentations about how this money will be used. We saw last week that there were a lot of good questions. This week, same. I really continue to believe we have a responsibility to deliberate on the use of these funds and provide meaningful input on them. Last week, for example, in public safety, there were significant concerns raised by council members about the pilot camera program and about the location that was chosen, right? If we continue to authorize and appropriate money before we have these discussions, we don't have a meaningful way of providing input. And again, going back to one of the informational meetings last week, one of our colleagues asked if the housing priorities were set in stone. Well, again, I would suggest that for them not to be set in stone, we shouldn't pass this before we have a chance to have that housing presentation. Because once we pass, again, this ordinance, that's the end of the line for council's formal input as to how at least this 6.3 million in ARPA funding will be used. That's not to say that there can't be informal input, but again, I don't think that we were elected to be passive advisors, informal advisors. I think the residents expect us to deliberate and discuss things on the record and have an opportunity to hear information about how money will be used, and then to have comments and questions and then vote accordingly. So I would encourage that we have a chance to hear all of those presentations about that 6.3 million before we approve this.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? And Mr. Fricker, oh yes, Mr. Neal, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to echo the sentiments of my colleague. And one of my concerns is I had a chance to catch one of the presentations that was online. And I don't mean to sound like a broken record, but I do not see how we can pass anything talking about that we want to ensure equitable investment when we do not have a definition and metrics that we all understand to make sure that the plan is equitable. Again, these dollars came to our community because of poverty and housing instability, those most adversely impacted by COVID. So one of the first things we should make sure that we're doing is that any investment, any expenditure is addressing those who have been most adversely impacted by COVID. If we don't use those basic metrics, which brought those dollars to our city, then we're flawed right from the beginning. And not to have, I've asked this of different departments, and I think some folks like using the word because it's in vogue. But again, not to have a definition, not to have metrics by which we evaluate our policy, our investment, and the procedures of that investment, and how we came to that policy decision is flawed. And so that's another reason why I ask that we take time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. All right. Okay, Mr. Fricker and Ms. Donnell, you, I assume, are still open to any comments or questions that may come in throughout the week. I do want to thank you. You expeditiously answered the questions that came in this week. Thank you very, very much for that. And Ms. Amobian, just saw your hand.
Yeah, I just put it up. Thank you, Mr. Chair. In reference to the comment made by my colleagues, especially Mr. Neal, I believe I heard in both presentations last week, because I did listen to both of them, the young lady who is the project manager, and I'm not sure why I'm forgetting her name. She's talked to us enough with Guidehouse, indicated last week that they are developing metrics by which they will determine how the monies will be allocated. So perhaps someone could get in touch with her to see how far along they are in the development, so we can kind of see what they're doing. And if she could share with us what they've already decided, that would be extremely helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Fusco.
Was my question clear?
You're breaking up a little bit at the end. I think I got the general gist, but there was some disruption there in your transmission.
Are you talking to me?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, I was just asking if we could have the young lady who is the project manager from Guidehouse, who talked in both presentations about developing the metrics, if she could share with us what they have already determined, or if they have a definition already, if we could have that information as soon as possible.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Please stop me when you can't hear me, because I'm in my office and there's terrible connection here. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Mr. Fusco.
Yes, thank you, Chairman Freeman. Yeah, with all respect to my colleagues who wishes we take time, from what I understand, we are taking time today. I've been around for quite some time. It's no secret, over 30 years in one form or another, in one position or another in the city. I've never seen this comprehensive of a communication strategy, to be honest with you, with a community and the council and the administration that we have laid out in tandem with the administration and council. 12 meetings. There's also going to be a portal for information exchange, not just a one-way, but an exchange back and forth. And this is just the beginning. The presentations that we will be hearing, I think those are like goals that are going to be set. I don't think anything is exactly in stone. What is before us is the 2021 budget adjustment. And one of the bigger items, I think, in terms of that is right now our CARES funding is deleted for our public utility. There's families out there who are relying on that. And to delay that much, much further, I'm not sure that's in our best interest as a community, as a city, especially with winter coming upon us here soon. But I certainly understand, appreciate, and respect the comments that were made before in terms of our input. we will have input whenever the operating budget for 2022, as well as the capital budget comes in, and we will be able to have input at that time. And I believe even after the 12 meetings that have been set up or in the midst of being set up, even after that, I envision us even having more informational type meetings, more opportunities for the community for their input, as well as the administration and everyone sharing what some of the goals are and what's going to actually come about whenever it comes to the ARPA funding. So certainly, again, I appreciate and respect the comments from before. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Fusco. Mr. Lombardo?
Okay, I was getting there, sorry. I would have to agree with Mr. Fusco, Mr. Chair, because there is so much communication that we're getting from the administration. I mean, Dr. Joan Williams has sent us emails on ARPA updated funds. And, you know, again, with the portal, I think everything will be very transparent. We're going to hear about it again in the budget. And I just am not in favor of delaying this any further. So, you know, I hear what my colleagues are saying, but I think we need to move. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think order of appearance here was tell you what, Mr. Neal, I'll come back to you because I have not been to Miss Holland yet, please.
Yes, sir.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my understanding that in 2020, there were some 2,300 utility disconnections, and that so far in 2021, there have been some 3,300 disconnected accounts. And so appreciating as I do the arguments for immediate passage of this and for a faster pace, I really do want to join my colleagues who have asked for a little more clarity, a little more deliberative process here for the purpose of having a greater understanding of exactly what's been presented here. Respectfully, a little more time to get some of these questions answered not only does not jeopardize the good things that can happen here, but respectfully, I would suggest that for the 2,300 disconnects that occurred in 2020 and for the 3,300 at issue in the year 2021, well, they are inapposite. So thank you.
Thank you. Now come to you, Mr. Neal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that. Again, I want to speak the concern about folks needing and assistance and whatnot. If folks have been following what's going on, there's money waiting for people to be able to access. The problem is they don't have the infrastructure in place to process these applications fast enough. So that's not a reason for us to rush through this. I don't see how anyone could think that we should process this without us having measures in place to make sure that we do right with these dollars. The federal government even gave us more time. Excuse me, I'm sorry. Gave us more time by pushing back the original date to January 31st, I believe it is, of 2022.
You're muted, Mr. Neal.
I'm sorry, I'm on two different devices there, sir. Somebody, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. It's imperative that we fulfill our fiduciary responsibility as the legislative body with oversight over these dollars. And to refer to our regular budgetary process, we still don't really have that under wraps where we fully understand that process and how to best have input on how those dollars are spent. And so I just ask that you heed our request. Let's take time to make sure that we understand that we have a process in place to make sure that the dollars are equitable. And since we're talking about water, that came up, we've been contacted by our residents about the inequity in our policy, where they can apply for heat, for gas, and for electric, but for water, we don't allow them to apply for any discount if they don't own the property. So if we want to start helping our residents that are most adversely impacted, as legislators, we could start right there by changing that policy. But to want to push this through and for us not to do our due diligence would be wrong. And many of our constituents have already expressed that. And one last thing, I did hear, and I acknowledge my colleague, Ms. Amobian, who said that, mentioned the young lady with Guidehouse. The concern there is that she's working on a policy. So decisions are being made, again, without a policy or metrics in place to determine what's equitable. Again, thank you for my time, Mr. Chairman, but I ask that we take the time to do our due diligence.
Thank you. I will go to Ms. Amobian and then Ms. Nish, I'll come to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just want to recognize the fact that I think we're only asking for time for more information and to be quite frank with you and the other members, that since I've been down here, 10, 11 years, it's been refreshing to have people on council who have been pushing us in a different way to seek more information. And I find that quite refreshing and very helpful in what we're trying to do. And for the first time in a lifetime of money that we are getting, $145 million from the federal government that we can use to improve our communities across this city, I am elated and quite frankly, very excited to have new voices and new ways of seeking information to help us do the best job we can with these dollars. And even the body that we are paying to help us strategically utilize these resources are saying that we need to have a metric to do this. And it would just be extremely helpful for them to talk to us about how do you plan to advise us on how to do this. And I don't know what the rush is, because we keep saying that we have until 2026 or 2025 or whatever the year is to spend these dollars. I hope that we can just take the time to do due diligence in our deliberations and decision-making as well. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. And just to remind everyone, we are talking about, appropriations for this year. We're not voting on $445 million here right now. Ms. Nish.
Thank you, Chairman Freeman. I just wanted to respond to one discrete issue. I believe there was a comment made on the reason we were not able to provide assistance to people was lack of ability to process applications. And I just wanted to be clear that the Akron Cares account, which is the funding that we use to assist water and sewer customers who are potentially facing shut off or inability to pay their bills, has been depleted down to $0. And the only step that's preventing us from infusing that account with additional funding is this budget amendment, which is the budget authorization we need to move ARPA dollars into that account. So I just wanted to to clarify that issue.
Thank you. Let's see, have we not heard from anyone? Okay, Mr. Malik.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate the discussion and input from a lot of different folks. Just want to briefly speak to the point about delay. Absolutely recognize the urgency in getting the money out there, and would like to move forward with as little delay as possible. The information sessions that have been scheduled are through the beginning of December. If we wanted to have a special meeting on Wednesday or Friday of this week and run through questions and answers about the remaining programs, would be happy to vote on this as soon as possible. To the point about Akron Cares, it's the first time that I'm hearing that the account has been depleted to zero. We absolutely should make sure there's money there. If we could, separately vote on that today, I think that would be appropriate. But the Akron Cares portion of the discussion is, I think, going to happen, I guess, on November 29th within budget. So we haven't had the chance to have that discussion. Again, it goes back to process. I respect the amount of information that's being provided, but much of it is being provided or asked to be provided after we vote, which is our way of approving or disapproving of things. And so, again, it, I think, puts the cart before the horse. And I just want to underline the fact that I'm not asking for any kind of delay. If we have a chance to ask questions and answers about the programs that are going to be funded with $6.3 million under ARPA dollars, I'll vote on this immediately following that. I just want to make that simple point.
Ms. Holland.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to make it known that I'm available for a special meeting on these issues as well. I would also add that I would imagine that for all of the disconnected accounts that I recited earlier that have occurred in 2021 and 2020, that it's my surmise that the CARES money was depleted prior to today. I don't believe anybody desires to delay anything, and that has never been the issue here. So I would join my colleagues in repeating the assertion that this is not about not liking money or not wanting to provide needed assistance. In fact, it is the concise opposite of that. Thank you.
All right, so I think I hear committee members saying, let's wait a while longer. So if somebody'd like to, we'll just continue to take time. If there's no, Mr. Malik.
I guess I just want to ask, is there any way that this process of getting this information can be sped up? Because I don't want to wait to vote on this until December 6th. So I like that. That's, I think, kind of a tough position. It can't be that we either wait a month and a half or we vote on something without having a chance to discuss and deliberate on it. Again, that's my issue. I mean, if Akron Cares has been depleted, I think we should have a special meeting and we should fund that immediately. But we haven't had a chance to talk through the rest of the things. And I think waiting till December 6th would be wrong. I think waiting another week, if we're not gonna, if another week we're still gonna be in the same position, we're just gonna have had a chance to talk through parks and public spaces, but we won't have talked about housing or budget or what have you. So I really think we should find a solution to this.
Well, I mean, one solution would be we could pass it now. I guess we can. Ms. Somerville.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. I'm just asking if the committee just will allow for another week's time just to make sure that all council members have the opportunity to get any of the answers to the questions that are still unanswered. So let's take another week's time, just asking if the committee will honor that.
Okay, Miss Baylor. You're on mute.
Sorry about that. I would
That's
like
right.
to make a motion for time on this.
Okay, we have a motion for time. Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
All right. And all in favor, time.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, very good.
Aye.
So get the questions in. Obviously, real people affected. So let's get our questions in so we can have clarity on this. And we will adjourn at 3:46. Thank you.
That is the final committee meeting for the day. Council will meet at 7 p.m. tonight. Thank you.
Hey, stranger danger. Oops.